Councilmember Jack Walsh, Committee Chair Jack Dovey is recuperating from surgery and not here. He's asked me to chair. So we will go ahead and call to order the meeting of the Land Use and Transportation Committee meeting. And is the first thing, is there any public comment?
Not on my end.
Okay. All right, seeing none. Let's go ahead to item A on the agenda, approval of the minutes of the August 7, 2023 meeting.
I move approval of the minutes, August 7, 2023, as it was submitted.
And I will second the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It passes unanimously. Item number 2, or item B, a limited license agreement with the City of Kent. And Mr. Cole.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Council, Chair. I'm here tonight to present to you the limited license agreement with City of Kent. A little background information on this agreement is between, obviously, the City of Kent and City of Federal Way that will allow the connection on South 272nd Street between South Star Lake Road and Pack Highway South for the Fiber Loop project. There's a map of the location. A portion of this will be done by Sound Transit. We'll be joining conduit that was provided for them, and then the rest of it we will install, as well as providing a conduit for City of Kent. The financial impacts, this is a no-cost agreement. It's just we're putting conduit in the ground for them. They're allowing us to use their space and share their conduit. Options considered tonight are options 1 or option 2, and the mayor recommends option number 1. And as always, I'm available for any questions.
All right. Any questions, anyone? No.
I like the no-cost option to the city.
I thought you might.
So with that, I move to forward the proposed agreement to the September 19, 2023 consent agenda for approval.
And I second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It passes unanimously. And continue on to item C. 27th Avenue Southwest at Southwest 344th Street Compact Roundabout, approval to award.
Yes, sir. Project background for this one is we were very fortunate. 10 bids were opened on August 25th. The lowest responsible bidder was Active Construction Incorporated. Project location, southwest corner of the city down there, 27th and 344th is the location. Project budget, this is a federal grant project of $877,500. The real estate excise tax will make up $180,000 of it, and then the traffic impact fees will make up another $180,000 for total funding of $1,237,500. Estimated expenditures, design is $170,000. Construction contract, low bid came in at $697,697. So pretty low. Construction contingency of 10% of $69,769.70. Construction management and inspection of $164,033.30. So estimated total cost is well below the funding available. Estimated total cost is $1,101,500. Options considered this evening is options 1 or option 2, and the mayor recommends forwarding option 1. Available for any questions?
All right. Any questions? Yes.
I had one quick question. Looking at the other quotes on there, the price is quite a bit of difference. Is that pretty standard or normal? I mean, it's not even 50,000 or less than the closest lowest bid next to it. I mean, they go up $200,000 more, so.
Yeah, the
That's
next.
pretty shocking.
3 to 5 were really tight. Active Construction is a company, is a contractor we've worked with regularly in the city, and so we have no doubts that they'll be able to do it for that.
So we're good, no concerns?
Do.
Okay.
So just where's it located at then? Where?
27th and 344th.
And, trying to zoom in on it here.
So, we got 344th and 27th. So west of Light of Christ Lutheran Church,
Okay, all right, got it.
kind of south of Alderdale Park,
Okay, got it.
southwest of Safeway Fred Meyer.
Okay, so just at, 344th where the Light of Christ Community Garden is, just take a head west. Okay, got it. All right. Any other questions? Okay. We have a motion.
I move to forward option 1 to the September 19, 2023 consent agenda for approval.
And I second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It passes unanimously.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you. And that takes us to item D, Transportation Grant Funding Application.
Good evening. I'm Christine Mullen, Engineering Manager for the city. Question before us tonight is, should the council authorize staff to submit the proposed grant applications for 2 transportation projects? WashDOT has issued a call for projects for their asset management program, and they're due in October. We've gone through and reviewed the criteria for the grant. We've identified 2 projects that we think would be competitive, given the scoring criteria. Here's the 2 projects. One is on 21st Avenue South between Southwest 320th to Southwest 339th. And then the other is on South 320th Street from First Avenue South to Pack Highway South. And so both of these projects are estimated at $3 million. The one on 21st, we're planning to request $2.4 million in grant funds and match it with $600,000 of city funds, which is made up of fuel tax and TIF funds. And then the one on South 320th, we already have one grant for $1.5 million that we got through PSRC last year. So we're requesting another grant of $1.5 million. So that one we are proposing would have no city funds. The options for you tonight are options 1 and 2, and the mayor recommends option number 1, which is to authorize us to submit the grant applications. And any questions?
Any questions from? No. So these are, what is the type of work that would be being done then?
It's preservation projects, so basically overlay,
Overlay, okay, all right,
but funded with federal grants.
okay, excellent. Council President Kochmar.
Does it include any sidewalks?
It would include upgrades to ADA ramps that are necessary to bring those up to current standards, but it wouldn't be replacing stretches of sidewalk, just mostly at the ramps.
Okay. And Deputy Mayor Honda.
Thank you. When you guys apply for grants in your department, you do the work yourself, is that correct? The
The grant
application?
applications themselves, yes.
So when the city hires this new person to do grants, will that new person be working with you? Just wondering.
I don't think that's the intent. I think the intent is that the transportation grants remain with Public Works for now. And that seeing who that new person is, and I think their goal is to go after more stuff related to the ARPA and other grants for other departments. Certainly in the future, if there's some camaraderie that allows leveraging, I think that would absolutely be something that would be discussed. But I think right now Tanya is working on something that's more outside of existing programs. So both us and Parks and Police all go after grants today. I don't think there's any change proposed currently in how those departments operate,
Do you,
at least that I'm aware of.
do you think if we had a grant, a department that had grant writers in it, I know you're pretty successful at getting grants, but would it be helpful? Take time, it must take a lot of time to apply for grants.
It does. I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, that's something we would have to talk about in detail. The grants we apply for are pretty technical. It's not like a lot of the socioeconomic grants that are pursued by agencies at large or nonprofits. It's more about telling a story and you know, explaining how you're going to use the funding to benefit the community at large. And it's a little bit more relationship and, like I said, telling the story versus ours are pretty strictly technical writing. So I'm not sure how much that aligns or not. I think that would probably be something we need to vet a little bit.
So when National League of Cities comes out with grant opportunities, and I've sent some into the mayor's office, and I know Councilmember Sefa Dawson has, and they don't go anywhere. And some of them are for transportation and roads. Should we be sending them to you instead?
I'm not familiar with the grants you're talking about. If you want to, you're certainly welcome to, or send them to,
Well, every now and then.
Director Davis?
National League of Cities comes out with grants that they send to member cities.
sure.
And when they look like something that we could use here in the city, I'll forward it on to the mayor's office. But nothing ever happens. And I know Councilmember Sefa Dawson has done the same thing. But especially when they're for road construction or transportation issues, should we be sending them to you instead?
I think you're supposed to send them to the mayor's office. If you want to CC us on us, that's certainly welcome. I'm not familiar with the specific grants you're talking about, so
Okay.
I don't know if it's NLC more or less putting out a announcement that there's other grants that we're already pursuing through FHWA or one of like this grant, for example, or PSRC, or if it's grants directly from NLC. So without a little more detail, I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head.
All right, thank you.
Right. And Council President Kochmar.
So, Brian, I always wondered, you know, about 20 years ago, I think, the Port of Tacoma shut down the road into the back end of city of Tacoma. So you can't go that way. So the people who live in northeast Tacoma, the only way they have to get to the freeway is up through Federal Way, using our roads. And I always thought that was really unfair, where they're coming up to use our roads, but we're not using their roads. How can we charge them for that?
Yeah.
So as a city, we can't toll roads. So I'm not sure there's an easy way for us to charge the city of Tacoma for them to use the road network. That's kind of part of the de facto definition of the road network, as it's a broader system for all. So yes, we maintain local, but you know, similarly, WashDOT can't come in and say we have to do something for residents to be allowed to get on I-5 or 18 or, you know, or Dash Point Road for that matter, since those are state roads that they're responsible for maintaining within city limits. So we don't have a way to direct toll Tacoma residents. I mean, I think to your point, this is probably more of a lobbyist activity to whether it's
That's
approach
exactly what I was going to say.
to approach either Tacoma or the state
Yeah.
and say, hey, something needs to get done with this to
Yeah.
restore the connection you're talking about.
And I think that's something we could put on our agenda in January, number
Sure.
one. And number two, with the PSRC, we should bring up that topic for discussion at the PSRC, which I think our mayor is now our person on the PSRC.
I believe you are correct.
Yeah.
Well, let's not forget that.
Yeah,
Okay.
it seems to me like the 356 roads like that, I mean, I suspect there's probably more northeast Tacoma traffic on it than what there is Federal Way traffic. coming out.
It's comparable.
And so it seems like that at least we should be able to leverage that some way with the state, with the.
Yeah, I mean, this conversation goes full circle, because, I mean, we certainly have city residents that are using 272nd, which is in the city of Kent, to get off of I-5 to get into Northern Federal Way. So, I mean, you are correct, and we absolutely should lobby for it, to the council president's point. But there's a little bit of a slippery slope here, because our residents and community certainly use pathways through, whether it's Des Moines, Kent, Tacoma, to get from wherever they want to go into and throughout the city as well. So there's, like I started with, I think a lot of this is, good for the system at large. And we are responsible for maintaining a component of that.
Yeah, well, it certainly would be an interesting topic for everybody to discuss.
It absolutely would. I fully agree with you.
All right, thank you. Oh,
I move to forward option 1 to the September 19, 2023 consent agenda for approval.
and I second. Any further discussion? No. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's approved unanimously. Right, and thank you.
Thank you.
Next, item number E, T-Mobile LLC site lease agreement, Lakota Park. And Mr. Kent Van Alstine.
Good evening, everyone. This is actually 2 agenda items, but I only have 1 PowerPoint for both of the agenda items, just as a procedural note. So this is, I think you've seen me present on a couple of these before. So these are site leases that we currently have in place with respect to a couple sites, and specifically T-Mobile in the city. T-Mobile wants to continue leasing a portion of these 2 properties. One's located at Lakota Park, the other one's in the BPA easement area near Twin Lakes, or in the BPA trail area near Twin Lakes, for the operation of certain equipment for use in connection with its wireless communication services. So these are what you'd colloquially know as cell towers. The city's had site lease agreements in place with T-Mobile for these locations since 2000 and 2003. That our leases generally have about a 5 to 10 year term, after which point we renegotiate new terms and enter into new leases. So for both of these leases, the revenue to the city would be $3,600 approximately per month for Lakota, and $3,750 approximately per month for the BPA Twin Lakes site. And then each agreement has an annual rent increase of 4% for the term of the lease. There's no cost to the city other than negotiating and preparing the lease agreements in the first place. And these agreements are substantially similar to other site lease agreements that are currently in effect with other companies. We try to keep an even playing field so that no one specific cell provider is getting an advantage over any other. So the options tonight are to forward the proposed site lease agreements to the September 19th consent agenda for approval, or do not forward the proposed site lease agreements and provide direction to staff. The mayor's recommendation is option 1, and again, this is 2 agenda items, so it'll need 2 separate votes.
Questions? Deputy Mayor Honda?
Thank you. The site at the BPA Twin Lakes, Twin Lakes and the BPA Trail don't really,
Yeah.
they're not even close.
I
to
think
each other?
that's what we call it on the lease. I'll show you.
The map. It's like really on the.
Yeah,
red line.
I had the same question. Oh,
It's this site, so here, I'll zoom out. It's just south of 348th Street here, where my cursor is.
Okay, yeah,
yeah, so far from Twin Lakes.
yeah.
I do not know why the lease is called that, but historically it's been called that, and I assume there's a reason behind it, but I do not know what it is.
Okay.
It's just you can't even see it here. It's actually not a tower itself. It's just kind of a small junction box that's underneath one of these, one of the BPA power lines that's used for equipment. It's either right under this one or right under this one.
Okay, yeah, I ride my bike there and walk there, but that's certainly not anywhere near Twin Lakes, so I was a little confused. Thank
A
you.
fair point.
Well, those lease rates, I mean, is there a way I can negotiate one in my backyard, just to, so.
Actually, Side note, before I joined the city, I would frequently be actually approached by private property owners who were seeking to negotiate them on behalf of themselves. So I believe the answer to that is yes.
So, I have one, Councilmember McDaniels.
Yeah, it's a simple one. Do you know how many locations we actually have, like T-Mobile has for coverage in the city? What an average would be for these guys?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I could easily get it for you, though. One of the paralegals I work with is the person who keeps all of the Excel
Tracks it.
spreadsheets of these things, so I'd be happy to get that information
Awesome.
for you.
Thank you.
And I have one question. What these lease payments, does it go into the general fund, or what budget does it go into?
That is a good question. I believe it goes into the fund of, so these are leases on, or the Lakota Park one in particular is on Parks property. So I believe that goes into Parks. I believe that's the answer is Parks. Again, I'm actually not 100% sure on that. So I'd be happy to follow up to make sure
Yeah,
I'm saying the
I
right
mean,
thing. But
that's-
I'm pretty sure it's Parks
I
specific.
believe both of them go into Parks, because
Yeah.
Parks actually operates both of those sites.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, EJ.
All right. If there's no further questions,
I move to forward the proposed T-Mobile LLC site lease agreement to the September 19, 2023 consent agenda for approval.
okay. Second the motion. Do we need to have that in, do we need to specify that as two separate motions, or can we do it all as
So I
one?
believe is this item E?
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
It'll need to be
Okay.
2 motions and 2 votes.
Oh, okay,
ultimately, is the answer.
so for item E, okay. All right, excellent. It's moved and seconded. Any further discussion? No. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And now the same thing for item F. Need hyperlinks in here.
It's a long lease agreement.
You know what would be easier is having just a single sheet of paper with the motions. I'm gonna suggest
How many pages in here?
It's the exact same motion, so if we go to item F and then you restate the same motion, that would work.
Okay,
I-
I got it.
I'm not showing bookmarks.
It's on the far left in the media. I can show you. Oh, they're going.
Let me see if I can find it. Have my seat.
You know, I do have a suggestion. It would be maybe for every committee, having the motions written out on a single piece of paper, because this isn't unusual.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So this is for item F, T-Mobile LLC site lease agreement, PBA slash Twin Lakes agreement. Right?
Correct.
Okay. So I move to forward the proposed T-Mobile LLC site lease agreement to the September 19, 2023 consent agenda for approval.
I second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
It approved unanimously. All right, so, all right. Item G, authorization to add one senior traffic reviewer position. EJ, go ahead.
So good evening. I am here tonight. This originally would have gone to FedRec in August, but there was not a FedRec meeting. And it's programmatic, so it's not out of the general fund. So it's actually programmatic to LUTC. So we talked to Chair Tran from the FedRec agenda, or FedRec committee, sorry, not agenda, as well as Councilmember Dovey, who's not here tonight. But that's why this is here tonight. So the conversation we had a little over a year ago when we originally came to the council about adding staff to the traffic division specifically for plan review for development. The recommendation at the time was to add one position, full well knowing to get to full staffing associated with the demand that we were seeing, we needed substantially more than that. We knew at the time we weren't going to be able to fill multiple vacancies at the same time, as well as there was some hesitation, frankly, more on staff's part than council's part, to bring on multiple people, and then, you know, what happens if we are getting more work done than we need, you know, what you know, et cetera, et cetera. So the recommendation from staff was to only bring in one. Council pushed us pretty hard to bring in 2 to 3 people for this, and we, as staff, pushed back a little bit, and it was only one. We do use 3 outside review firms for traffic work. That has not changed, and frankly, the workload's gone up. So in talking to City Administrator Davis and the mayor, we had a long conversation, and then was suggested to me to go back to council and to add a second traffic reviewer beyond the one that we added last year. So we went from 0.4 traffic reviewers to 1.4 for the city. So this reviews every development application. It reviews everything associated with the comp plan, long-range planning, everything that happens with development. So with that being said, it's also funded by the development review fees. So this is not something that comes out of the general fund. This is something that technically is budgeted within the red light photo enforcement fund. That's where all of our traffic staff is budgeted out of. But it is reimbursed by developer paid review fees associated with projects. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions. The mayor's recommendation is to authorize adding 1 FTE in the position of a senior traffic reviewer specifically for the purpose of development. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Right. Deputy Mayor Honda.
Thank you. So as we go into a budget year, not this year, but, you know, next year, we have a number of new positions that I realize we've added since we last did the budget, especially in the police department. And there might not be any financial impact now, but going forward in the future with these positions, will they continue to be funded out of the red light fund? And do you expect that that'll continue to have enough funding to pay for these positions?
Yes, they will continue to be funded out of the red light fund. So they are housed in that fund, but they are funded by developer review fees. So that is the home base per se for them. So when we do a traffic review, the traffic review fee goes into that, and effectively that more than replaces the salary today. So we are putting money into the fund as opposed to taking it out, if that makes sense. But they're not housed in 001, similar to police, which I think was your example. They're housed in a completely different enterprise fund from that. So there would be 0 impact, and there could not be an impact without council action to move staff, which is not something I personally would recommend. I would recommend keeping the setup that we have. But they are housed in a restricted account, and then they're paid for actually by development fees. Effectively, what this means in practice is we will be outsourcing less work. Right now, we're using 3 on-call consultants. We'll continue to have 3 on-call consultants, but we will farm them less work and do more in-house.
Does this position need a vehicle?
No.
Oh, that's good to know.
Stole my question.
Huh?
Stole
Oh.
my questions.
You can
No.
ask it anyway.
No, it does not.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Councilman McDaniel, do you have another question?
Ask how much is
I
in the
do.
fund right now.
What fun? No, I'll wait on that one.
Oh, okay.
In a second. My first question is, okay, so after this one, will we have 2.4 and we have 1.4 right now?
Correct.
And then, so with this person coming on, you're saying that we're not going to have to rely so much on the 3, so there'll actually be a reduction on requiring the outside consultants maybe a little bit?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So we will keep all 3. We basically rotate. So project 1 goes to reviewer 1, or outside company 1. Project 2 goes to outside company 2. So we will keep that rotation because that's part of what just keeps level workload and lets us absorb peaks and valleys within the reviews that we receive. So we will keep that practice, but the amount of projects or the time between projects being outsourced will get smaller. So yes, in totality, we will be outsourcing less work.
Okay.
Council President Kochmar.
Are we getting a lot of new applications in? I'm just curious.
For engineering positions?
Well, for no development
Yes.
projects.
Yes, and they're getting more complex. So that's the bigger thing is we have been seeing, within traffic, we've been seeing more large projects that take a significant amount of project time. Like, so the Pape Industries, we are still working on reviewing that. They're actively in construction. Our traffic staff is still working with their design on the entrance area for that with them.
I'm just wondering if we're getting new development projects.
We are.
Can you, free to let us know what they are?
So there's a number that are associated with the Warehouse A, Warehouse B of IRG and the future development of that. There is Smith Brothers recently came in. There's a number of full plats that we are actively working on throughout the city. There's a number of short plats. There's at least 2 more speculative developments that we're working on that I can't repeat yet. And then, I don't know, Keith knows them as well, if not better than I do, for the large developments that are coming in. There's a number of other ones that have been in the pipeline for a long time that are getting to the point where we're just starting engineering. So they're probably not necessarily new names to council, but they're actually advancing in the project.
Okay. All right, Deputy Mayor Honda.
Thank you. What do we typically pay for a consultant to do this job?
So we have fixed rates for all 3 consultants. We pay them mostly an hourly rate. So it is between $200 and $350 an hour.
So what would that work out to per year if they were full-time?
400,000 or 500,000.
Okay, thank you.
Kind of related to that, is in the last year, do you have any figure on how much have we paid to the outside consultants the last year, the last 2 years, or anything like that?
When I looked for this year, we were at 190,000 for 2023.
Okay. All right. So, in theory anyway, having doing it in-house, we should be able to reduce the,
Correct. Now, the developers are responsible for paying that amount. So, I mean, it's not going to necessarily be a savings in dollars to the city. The cost of the city is going to effectively be salary, not that. What this gives us is it gives us a better response time, which is something the development community has been asking us for, and more access to the staff from the development community.
so are the fees that the developer pays, are they flat fees, or are they based on per hour of work that it takes? How does
So
that work?
depending on what type of permit it is, they can be both. For the large permits that this position is typically worked on, it's hourly. And then
Okay.
for the outside consultants, when we farm them out, they pay 110% of the cost associated with it going out.
So it can potentially save developers money also then?
It will save developers money.
Okay, so
yes.
that's a plus as well then. All right.
Yes.
Okay, very well. Looks like there's no further questions. Do we have a motion?
Yes, sir. I move to forward option 1 to the September 19, 2023 consent agenda for approval.
And I second the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's approved unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Cheney Scatson. All right, item H, quarterly update progress on the comprehensive plan periodic update.
I think I need to share the screen. Is it good to go? Okay, sweet, sorry. Oh, okay, good evening, Council President and Council, or Deputy Mayor and the rest of the Council, Cheney Scatson, Senior Planner. And yeah, today we're gonna do another one of the quarterly updates regarding the comp plan, but focusing on housing and how the legislative direction has changed over the last couple months and years that inform how the housing chapter for our local comp plan will be, like what will be in it and what we're directed to do. So in addition to that topic, we'll also go over review and discuss the adoption timeline for the comp plan as it's important to make sure that the LUGC committee feels confident or feels that it's an appropriate amount of presentations and time with the comprehensive plan before we go for action, meaning towards adoption of the plan. And then, yep, we'll review the legislative changes for the housing chapter. So first discussion topic is around our adoption timeline. So you may remember we started this whole process in 2021 and have been working diligently, and we're kind of rounding the corner to about a little more than a year left. And there's a lot of procedural steps that we'll need to take in the last 6 to 9 months of 2024, which is coming up closer than I'd like to admit. But more or less, here's what you can expect around the end of, towards the end of 2024. We'll be continuing our Planning Commission briefings. So that's something that we've been doing over the last year and a half, is presenting chapters as they're ready to discuss with the Planning Commission. And then in April, we're, currently projecting to do our external, or send our draft comp plan out for external review. And that's a public review that's done with PSRC, the King County, and Department of Commerce. And then in June, we would have our LUTC briefing, like we normally do, the quarterly briefings, just giving an update on what the status is on all the chapters. And then after that June LUTC briefing, begin the Planning Commission public hearings. And so that's a really important step and necessary for before we can come back for the committee taking action, which is scheduled for October or November, coming back to LUTC, and that's when in the packet would be the entire comp plan and an agenda bill and an ordinance for updating or adopting the periodic update to the comp plan. And then we're scheduled to go to council for action in October or November. This is a loose schedule, so we've built in buffer time to get there earlier, or if we need, spill over to December. But just a reminder that we are on track, and we'd really like to meet our goal of adopting the periodic update by December of 2024.
I have a question before you start. So there's going to be a public review of this plan. Does this group review all of the comp plans in King County, and how do they manage to do that?
So PSRC will be reviewing, I believe they'll accept the entire comp plan, but they're going to be really looking at our transportation, housing, and centers chapters. And we have a set criteria and checklist that they'll be using. So PSRC will have a review. And then the King County AHC, the Affordable Housing Committee, this is new for them, for this organization or this interjurisdictional group to review housing chapters. So the King County AHC will just be reviewing the housing chapters, or any chapters that have housing-related policies that they would need to see. And so this is the first time that King County AHC Committee has done that, and they're estimating, I think, between it's like 3 months to do their review. I believe some cities have already gone through for their housing chapter, so Redmond, and I believe maybe Bellevue or Seattle, and Federal Way, we're hoping to get a draft chapter to them between February or April. So the goal is to get it there sooner, so that if there are issues or comments or concerns, then we have time to address them.
And what happens if they don't like what they see?
So this is a pre-comment period, but there will be later, or you might have noticed on the last page of the presentation, or on the memo, that AHC will have a role in monitoring and kind of reviewing or evaluating annual reports on how the city's doing in meeting our housing target or our housing production. I know this is really new, and I'm not very familiar with what the reasonable measures might be, but I think the goal is that there's this monitoring and evaluation of the comp plans to ensure that each city is pulling their weight or implementing very meaningful policies to addressing housing need.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, I mean, do they have veto power over it, or is it just input that they provide?
No, not veto, but in terms of their authority, I'd love to get back to you on that, actually, because I don't want to be incorrect, but I know that, for example, where we have like a regional growth center, city center core, our downtown, that receives funding from PSRC. And then what we're working on in South Station, where that future Tacoma Dome Link extension station will be, that's a candidate for a countywide growth center. And so that's a criteria that we would meet through the county and eligible for funding to support the creation of the center. But I'm not completely sure what type of, impacts or I don't know, things we would miss out on for a housing chapter not meeting it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. So go ahead.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
thank you for your patience with us.
Yeah, no, of course. So I guess, while we're discussing, the LUTC committee is it feel appropriate that, we continue doing these briefings, and then the June briefing will probably be a little longer than usual, where we go over maybe some high-level content of each chapter, and then you'd have access, of course, to the draft, public review draft of the comp plan, and then just coming back one more time for action, where we would then hope to see a motion to move on to council to make our deadline. Does that sound about right, or is there any hesitation with that amount of meetings?
I think it sounds reasonable. I mean,
Okay.
Councilmember Tran? Yeah.
I looked back on how it was done in the past, and I don't think I think even these quarterly updates is new and different, something that wasn't done with the previous periodic update. So I'm glad to have as much face time and sharing with progress along the way. So as long as you're feeling comfortable, then I think we're on a good track. Okay, wonderful.
right.
Thanks. So before we dive into this the housing chapter for the comp plan, just wanted to remind everyone that the city adopted a housing action plan in 2021, and that set a great framework and has done a lot of work for the housing chapter as we are working on for the periodic update. It kind of set some foundational, like a framework to what we heard was important from the community. So a lot of the community outreach we did for the housing action plan easily spills over to what we're doing for the housing chapter now. Of course, what we used to build or create this housing action plan is a different criteria, a different set of rules, a different set of things we're trying to accomplish in the housing chapter or in the comp plan. But I'd say it's very supplementary. It's very helpful to the housing chapter itself. And maybe in the future you'll get an update on our progress with updating these or with implementing some of these strategies, because we've been working really hard, and there's some strategies that have been completely implemented by now and others that are in progress. All right, so we'll begin with the Growth Management Act. So the Growth Management Act, through House Bill 1220, you may recall, amended some of the language. And in summary, these 4 points, in addition to, establishing those new housing uses for permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, emergency shelter, and emergency housing, it also included direction for planning for sufficient land capacity for housing needs. So that's something that we already did, right? That's part of the comp plan, is making sure we got our housing target and our job target. Is there enough zone capacity to meet that housing need? Things have just got a little more complex, because instead of just getting a blanket housing number, how we did at the beginning of this process, that housing target is now divided by income band. So now there's additional work or additional understanding to what housing is affordable by income band, and ensuring that there's a sufficient capacity to accommodate those different income bands. So that's one major piece from the GMA update. And the next bullet here is providing for moderate density housing options. That's basically House Bill 1110, our missing house or middle housing. So that's duplexes, triplexes. It's basically legislative direction to be planning for middle housing, which is one of the strategies to the Housing Action Plan. Third being making adequate provisions for housing for existing and projected needs for all economic segments of the community. It sounds pretty similar to the ones above, but this really gets at the fact that the role that the city has, the city doesn't often build housing. Cities, jurisdictions in general don't often build housing, but they play a very influential role on where housing can be located, what it can look like, how it's built, and its affordability, and it can influence the affordability level. So with those sorts of parameters, more or less, I believe that this bullet really gets to the point of, the city is going to need to play a role in being kind of a conduit between those players who supply the housing that doesn't that isn't built by the market. For example, the lower income bands or permanent supportive housing. So it's coordinating with our SCIP or working with other developers that otherwise wouldn't be serving other income bands. And lastly, identifying racially disparate impacts, displacement, and exclusion. So this is about anti-displacement. Well, it's more than that. It's analyzing it's requiring our chapter for the housing chapter to identify housing policies and regulations that have led to disparate impacts among racial groups, and then begin to undo those impacts, identifying areas that are of high risk of displacement, and establishing anti-displacement strategies or policies. So an example of an anti-displacement strategy would be if there is a naturally occurring affordable housing complex. There's no regulations making it affordable, but the rents are, because maybe it's an old complex, or maybe because of its location, or maybe because of its amenities. An anti-displacement strategy would be for the city to adopt like a notice of intent to sale ordinance, so that instead of selling to the highest bidder, that like there would be a notice that some agencies or organizations that want to preserve that housing to maintain its affordability, that they would be notified and would have an option or an opportunity to try to purchase the building, not to flip it and not to raise the rents, but to preserve that housing that's affordable for lower income levels. Another example of an anti-displacement strategy that can assist in undoing some of these racially disparate impacts would be community land trusts, where people are owning. I actually am not very super familiar with community land trusts, but I understand them as an ability for the community to own part of the property and help preserve it for the long term. Okay, so now.
Quick question on some of this, on the racial disparate impacts. Within the city of Federal Way, I mean, we're becoming increasingly diverse. I mean, very much increasingly diverse. I mean, how much impact does that have on what, on what this covers? I mean, it seems like that we're already having a positive impact on racially disparate, and making it less exclusive.
Sure.
As
So
it is.
I think it is maybe more than maybe who is residing here, but the housing options that are accessible depending on your income level. So and I believe later in this presentation there's a graph kind of comparing the disposition of the city, the composition of the city by race, ethnicity, and the rates of home ownership. So undoing racially disparate impact would be, increasing opportunities for there to be, equal levels of home ownership across income, or not income, by race. So where some groups are maybe underrepresented, that there are, whatever barriers that are in the way, whether it's there just aren't affordable homeowner options at that income level, or there are maybe other things that require, analysis and investigation. That those are looked at and understood.
Okay, all right, thank you. Go ahead. Sorry about interrupting.
And then I feel like I'm taking too long, so I'm just going to buzz through a summary of how the countywide planning policies were updated as well. And so the language for consistency, to be consistent with the GMA updates, because the countywide planning policies were updated in 2021, thoroughly, and so this most recently, just a couple weeks ago, they were updates were adopted as well. Amendments were adopted as well, and so that was to ensure consistency between the countywide planning policies and the GMA that we just went over. This is what established our jurisdictional housing need by income band. And it updated the requirements for the housing inventory analysis, a component to the housing chapter, and added new policies to improve the effectiveness of existing housing policies. Oh, here we go. So understanding racially disparate impacts. I guess I should have just jumped to the next slide. So I'll read this. Racially disparate impacts. When policies, practices, rules, or other systems result in a disproportionate impact on one or more racial groups. So this bar graph on the left is the racial composition of the city. So green being white households, purple being other race, blue being Hispanic or Latino, orange being Black or African American, and dark blue being Asian. So that's a breakdown of households in Federal Way. But when you look at who's owning homes and who owns their home, and you see that there is a lot more green on the right side and a lot less of some of the other colors. And so this graphic is hopefully trying to tell a story about that there's past policies, and likely many of those that predate the incorporation of the city, that have systemic impacts on access. And so part of understanding and undoing racially disparate impacts is understanding or taking a closer look on the outcomes. Like, are these equitable outcomes? And then what policies would maybe assist in promoting more equitable outcomes? All right, if there's no questions, I'll move on. So this here is a bar graph of the countywide housing need for the entire county. So the farthest bar on the left is the non-PSH, the non-permanent supportive housing for 0 to 30% AMI, and that's 81,000. That's housing that isn't, there isn't maybe a manager for the site, it's not facilitated, or what am I trying to say? It's not like some of the Stevenson Motel or other permanent supportive housing options. Could be done through like an ADU or other non-regulated, I think is the word I'm looking for. And then permanent supportive housing is, heavily regulated. Incomes, and then it's down, as we move to the right, you see the incomes bands are increasing from 30 to 50%, or AMI, 50 to 80, 80 to 100, 100 to 120, and then over 120. So you kind of see this dip. There's really a large housing need on the ends of the spectrum. Those of the lowest incomes, and then those are the highest incomes. And I think this is very consistent with what we found in the Housing Action Plan, whereas actually for Federal Way, a majority was on the higher end of the spectrum. And this is a result to our lagging residential production rate. Not only does Federal Way need housing that meets the need of all income levels, but there's just such a lack of housing being developed that even for-profit is, or market rate, above market rate, is housing that's needed in the city. And that's why we've been working so hard on implementing the Housing Action Plan to evolve the development climate to achieve a market rate of housing, but then also understanding that there are needs on the other end of the spectrum. So, sorry, I hate to go on a tangent, but this is the county-wide housing need. So this is for the whole county. When the county took this number that they got from the state, they would then be disaggregating it to the local jurisdictions. And there were 3 options that they analyzed. There was more deviations of this, but one of them was the first one, option 1, was to focus new growth. So that's giving the same share of new housing growth that's affordable to every jurisdiction, treating them the same. The second option was to focus on 2044. So saying, okay, well, we'll look at what your housing stock looks like right now, and everyone at the end of the day should have the same amount of affordable housing, the same composition of housing stock by 2044. And option 3 is saying, okay, well, we'll focus on new growth, but adjust for local factors. So that's the same share of new housing growth that's affordable in every jurisdiction, but it adjusts the outputs, so the number of units by income band within each income, and that's by local factors. And after a lot of analysis, option 3 was selected And, or, you know, there's a very long process that the county followed to do this. And as a result, that's Federal Way's, here's the graph of what that resulted in Federal Way's housing need by income band. With the largest being over 120% AMI. So similar, not as much units needed at the, you know, extremely or severely low income as the county, across the whole county. And I think that's because a lot of, and the really low dips in the middle, it's considering the existing affordable housing in the city, both that's regulated and restricted and that's naturally occurring. So we started, I mean, many of my presentations over the last year and a half has said, oh, we're planning for 11,260 housing units by 2044. Well, now we're planning for that many units, but in this composition. So it's taking a much closer look and saying, okay, you know, what policies, goals and policies and implementing actions do we need to do to accommodate housing units by income band? Okay. Oh, yep. And I'm kind of wrapping up now. This is something I include in all of the periodic update presentations, is kind of how we're doing, a quick snapshot on our progress. So many chapters are still in progress, but a few have shifted from the in progress column to have been to the Planning Commission or been briefed at Planning Commission. So climate change and resiliency has been briefed at Planning Commission. This doesn't mean that these chapters are done being drafted, or we still welcome as much input as the community is, you know, willing to give us and engage with on these topics. Overall, a number of them still have conversations to be had about implementing actions. But for the most part, we're getting closer. Twin Lakes, as you see, is kind of an outlier. It's something that we haven't started yet. That's the Twin Lakes chapter of the comp plan is an existing sub-area plan that was written in 2012. So we're trying to see where that fits in, whether it belongs with the centers chapter or if it's a standalone. So I think that concludes my presentation for tonight.
All right. Councilmember McDaniel.
Could you go back to the slide that had the, that one right there?
Yeah.
So my understanding on this one is the most of the housing that we're looking at trying to build is not low income then?
A majority of our housing need is like over 120% AMI.
And the AMI is what number at this moment?
Sure, yeah, that's the area median income. So these percentages, these columns, these brackets are categorized by income band. So, and that's something that includes the size of the household.
Yeah.
So like a household of 1 versus a household of 4. I didn't include that data in this presentation.
Do you happen to know what a family of 4 would be in order to?
More or less, yeah.
Yes.
So for 2023, a family of 4 for the King County metro area, which Federal Way belongs to, I believe it's like $134,000.
So this is, so that larger thing is 120% of that 130,000, so roughly about 150?
Above that, yeah. That's a
Okay.
great way to think of it.
Okay, so families who make about 150,000 is what we're looking at building houses for?
Is the greatest housing need in terms of quantity.
Okay. And the second one is, so are these rules, regulations in this book that we were making? And then my second part, because of that question, is some of the stuff you mentioned sounds like we're dictating who can buy a house or who's not allowed to buy a house. And also, how are we going to, how do you force a builder to build? If we don't have these houses being built, what is the apple versus the stick scenario that we're going to be using when you guys write these up?
Yeah, I think your first question is around the comp plan. Like, what does this document look like?
Yeah,
Right,
well,
so
like,
it's
we put this together, this plan, and it has all these, ideas, for lack of a better term. So I have these ideas, and based off of those ideas, are those ideas then becoming ordinance, rules, regulations? Is there any legal enforcement of those? And if not, are they just guidelines or ideas we'd like to stick with?
I think that the comprehensive plan is supposed to be something that staff uses every day in terms of there are oftentimes when we're reviewing building permit or land use permit applications that we need to find, there should be support in the comp plan saying whether we should do this or whether we shouldn't. So the document itself serves as serves not only to provide policy direction, but also we'll have an implementation chapter where we'll also inform the work plans of staff on what needs to be done to achieve the vision by 2044, but also to realize the goals and the policies.
If I could just jump in and answer that in a slightly different way, and forgive me if this is information that you're already well apprised of, but our comprehensive plan is a large document, probably 1,000+ pages. And so these ideas get put into a lot of words and policies and goals within that comprehensive plan. And then underneath the comprehensive plan, we have our city code, and our city code ordinances, as you described it, has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. And so when the comprehensive plan says we're planning for X numbers of, certain income bands or whatever, in order to facilitate that, to make it happen, there are other implementing actions which Shinny is referring to, but there's actual code that's written that can push things in certain ways, if that makes sense. So it's ideas, and then it becomes writing in the comprehensive plan, and that filters down to a higher level of specificity in the code itself.
And if I can add a third version. So it's important to understand, we have a housing target. And people always ask, well, what if you don't hit your target? The target is a planning capacity number. So we need to make sure that we have zoning in our city that will allow for us to reach that 11,260 number, right? And so then on these income bands, so this is new. And so, the question is, first off, we can't make anybody build here, right? So we have zoning capacity that would allow for, basically, right now, our estimated capacity is over 14,000 new housing units we could accommodate with our existing zoning in the city now. What we actually get over the next 20 years, there's a lot of policy decisions that you guys make, regulation decisions that you guys make that will influence that number at the end of the day. But our role is to simply plan for us to be able to accommodate that. And so likewise, with these income bands, I think one of the questions we might specifically ask is, well, this shows a lot of units at 120% AMI, which you said, okay, that's about $150,000 a year for a family of 4. So what does that work out to be a mortgage or a rental rate that they can afford? And how are we showing that we're planning for that as in addition to some of these other bands? And I think that's what our job is to do, is to demonstrate, and you can do that by density, right? Making assumptions that higher densities are smaller units, potentially are cheaper, and that might address some of the lower income bands, whereas maybe, people want us to have luxury apartments or luxury condominiums in town. Is there anything that the city can do to actually try and make that happen? Those are some of the things that we'll try and address with the housing chapter of the comp plan as we write that up.
Okay. We'll have more conversations. I saw some more on there. So, okay, thank you.
All right,
So,
Council President
Keith,
Keith.
Tanny, so at 120 AMI, that is probably about a $700,000 house.
So most of our single-family plats, and we gave you a number last summer on how many plattable lots we had. Do you remember? It's like 1,700. So every plattable lot will likely get a house that's about that value, just because that's what market will dictate in the city. I think, new construction, new homes, we have there's exceptions, obviously. We have there's a 100-unit project north of 336 east of Pack Highway called Creekside Commons, and those are smaller lots. Those will likely be at a lower price point than $700,000, but we still have subdivisions that are going through the review process, creating new lots. Those will be single-family detached houses, most likely. We still have to look at our code as it relates to the changes in the recent legislation, but there will be some freestanding single-family houses still built in the city of Federal Way, and that will be at that price point. We are, I have no idea, as we talk about the TC3 development with Trent, one of the reasons you guys selected us to move forward with Trent was they were gonna wrap townhouses around the bases of those 7-story apartment buildings. I have no idea what the price point of those will be, but my guess, given the fact that they're in an urban setting, they're within walkable distance to the train station. I would hope they'll be somewhere around the $500,000 level, even though that they're attached wall townhouses. But the market will dictate some of that stuff.
So in order to help the market, we're going to have to do some accoutrements as well, you know, because if I'm going to buy a 500 and up condo in the downtown, I want someplace to go for, you know,
Absolutely. You know, we'll need to look at the
in safety.
amenity side of things, the safety, but also park space, you know? If they have dogs, where are they gonna take their dog for, is there a dog park close by? If they've got small kids, you know, where are they gonna go? Can they get to Steel Lake Park from downtown walking, or do they have to get in their cars? So all of those things, I think, are important for us to be successful with this.
Have you ever, there's one other thing I've always kind of wondered too, you know, when we're always out there, we go to Washington DC and we lobby for money, and we go to the state and lobby for money. We have a lot of areas in the city that aren't sewered, and you're not going to get any real development without sewers. And that's the same for east of the freeway. If you want to have that area developed, they have to have sewers. I don't understand why we're not working with the Water Sewer District to make it so it's financially feasible for them to extend the sewers.
That's a great question. And I honestly don't know the complexities of those areas that are currently on septic now. And
There's even parts of Marine Hills that are on septic, believe it or not. Yeah. So I just think that in your planning and your future planning, that you'd want to take that into account. Because you're always thinking about, gee, how do we, you know, we think of the view, or we think of the traffic impact fees, or this, but we don't consider sewer.
We've had a couple conversations with Brian Asbury on that. I think that's going to be an ongoing conversation as the city starts to look at the areas that are underdeveloped. Absolutely.
I even told them, hey, when we go to Washington DC, you ought to talk to us about lobbying for you to get, because they can't extend the sewers without, you know, either doing a LID, Local Improvement District, or having some funds to do that with. Anyway, just an idea. Thanks.
All right. Is that all of your presentation?
Yeah, that was it, yeah.
Oh, okay, so any other questions? Great job on the presentation, thank you.
Yeah. All right.
All right, thank you very much,
I
Janie.
I can follow up with those AMIs by income band for next time, or
All
another
right,
time.
all right, thank you. And item I, progress update on Sound Transit project in Federal Way. Ken Smith.
Good evening. So again, Ken Smith, Public Works Department, Sound Transit Liaison, here to update you on the Sound Transit activities in Federal Way. So, north of 317th, work at Mark Twain Elementary is complete, so that got finished just before school started. Realignment and restoration of the Human Creek still ongoing. The new traffic signal at Military and Star Lake is now scheduled for installation the week of September 18th. Drainage, landscaping, plants, noise walls, system duct bank, ballast, OCS installation, fencing, and MSE wall construction is ongoing. Rail delivery installation welding also ongoing. For City Center, they are expected to move the phase closure of 23rd Avenue South into the next phase starting tomorrow. So they're working on doing it actually tonight as a night shift to move the traffic over. Along with that, they'll have new sewer, water, and additional utility work along 317th and 23rd, basically related to the next phase. Once they flip over, they'll finish the second half. Station work is ongoing with plumbing, electrical, mechanical, elevator and escalator work, fire alarm work, and ceiling panel installation. Construction of the garage is ongoing with plumbing, HVAC, and fire protection rough-in. And then for the end-of-line facility, door installation, ceiling installation, and floor installation. So this is a little bit more for the artwork kind of in response to some questions before. So for Federal Way Link Extension, there's 5 total locations that they've identified with 3 new pieces of artwork. The 3 new pieces are essentially at location 2, 4, and 3. 5 is the chronologue, the existing one. So for number 1 is the relocation of the high five sculpture, which is currently off-site, but will be relocated in the what they call the kiss and ride, where you'll drop off passengers. Number 2 is the they call it diachronic glass array, which is inside the station itself, essentially hanging from the ceiling as you'd enter. And I think it stretches the whole length, so you could see it as you go up the escalators, up the stairs, and up at station level. Number 3 is the west facade of the parking garage, which includes the artist is Christine Nguyen, and I should have said artist for the glass is Catherine Widgery. Number 4 is the lamp, done by Donald Lipsky, that we've discussed before. And then 5, the existing chronologue, which is right now set to be potentially demolished or retired from the Sound Transit Art Collection. A little bit of extra pictures for these. There's the high five on the left. You can see it's in the bottom right. This is sort of a rendering that they've done for the Widgery artwork, which is the ceiling panels inside the station. And then, again, the picture of the potential for the lamp right now. Let's see. Right now, for the ceiling work for the Catherine Widgery artwork, the brackets that hold that piece have been delivered and installed. And then the artist is starting fabrication for the remaining support brackets and glass fins this year, and it's expected to be installed after station construction is complete. Let's see. For the artwork on, let me jump to, for the Donald Lipsky piece, the lamp. He's still continuing to develop his design, but the foundations are expected to be poured now, probably in the fall when they get to that location. For the garage artwork, here's a couple renderings. On the left is the rendering of what it should look like, and on the right is an actual photo of some of the printings that have been done so far. So the printed elements, they'll be applied to the garage screening louvers. They're expected to be Q3 of 2023, so happening roughly right now. And then they'll be panelized and delivered to the site with the expected installation Q1 of 2024. Okay. As far as the operations and maintenance facility south, staff is continuing to work with Sound Transit on individual design elements. For the NEPA draft, SEPA supplemental draft, is going to be published, expected to be September 22nd of this year, and there'll be a 45-day comment period, basically starting that same September 22nd to November 6th. That includes 2 public hearings, or public meetings, I should say. One is an online meeting, October 19th. The second, an in-person at the Federal Way Performing Arts and Event Center. That's the 24th from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. And then I don't have any significant updates for the TDLE since the last meeting, and I'll answer any questions.
All right. Council President Kochmar.
So, we have people coming into our city in droves that are young men in their 20s and 30s, it looks like to me, maybe older, coming off the buses. And so my worry is, what's going to happen when we're the end of the line for light rail? And I don't know if you talked to them about that at all. Are they going to have security, or how are we going to keep that from happening?
Yeah, they do have a plan for security. Right now, the end of line facility is the Engle Lake Station, so it's a similar plan for when Federal Way is the end of line. Additionally, there's an extra bus service that will come with that.
So I don't understand, what are they doing to?
I don't know if I have specifics on what their plan is for their security on site. I know a little bit of what is intended, but as far as their overall plan, I don't know. I'd have to get back to you.
Yeah, maybe you could just talk to them about that. That's a big concern for us.
Councilmember McDaniel.
When these are finalized and the project is complete, whose responsibility for like those areas for maintenance and service? Is that part of our parks, or do they have their own staff that will handle that territory, that property?
You're speaking for the artwork pieces?
Yeah, the artwork pieces, and then actually the actual property itself, like there where they have it's kind of like a little bit of a park and thing, and the kiss and goodbye thing and all that stuff.
Right, it is all Sound Transit property, so they have their own maintenance facility specialist for those, and it is their responsibility.
Okay, thank you.
Council, for Deputy Mayor Honda.
Thank you. The public meetings that you've described, how will the public know about those meetings?
I believe they get published, the dates are going out as soon as they publish the NEPA and the SEPA draft. So they'll be on the website, and then I believe notices go out through their mailer, their email mailer.
Could you show that slide again so I could write down the dates,
Sure.
please? So, is this, and I already know the answer, Sound Transit will be responsible for publicizing these meetings.
Correct.
I'll say once again, I think the city should also, even though it's not our job, but we should also let the public know when these meetings are occurring. The entire city, since this is going to affect the entire city.
Sure.
Thank you.
Right. And I have a couple of questions. One is what do you call it, chronologue? Is that
Yes.
what? And
Chronologue.
it's going away then, from my understanding?
That is the current plan. They were looking to repurpose it, or I should say, to relocate it to another location. But based on basically the setup of its structure, it wasn't feasible. And part of it's not working correctly anymore. So they reached out to the artist, and they're working on either returning the art back to the artist or potentially demolishing it or doing something else with it.
And with the way what they're doing there in that area, it wouldn't be able to just stay.
No, because it's sitting on the existing transit center station, so that's going to get demolished when they, once they build a new station, then that becomes a road.
Okay, all right. And then also kind of art-wise, I mean, with and I think that we've discussed this a little bit before. 320th is the largest entrance to Federal Way, and right there, the Sound Transit Bridge going across there is going to be the main, that's what people are going to see.
Right.
As they enter the city. And it seems like that it would be some type of artwork there entering the city, that, but there's no plan for any artwork there. But that seems like that would be one of the prime places where there should be artwork.
When we had discussions with Sound Transit on this, it's related to their maintenance of that structure, and they need to have access to, at times they have to repaint it, essentially, to reseal it. So they did not want to have any art on that section.
Okay, all right. And one last question, the end-of-line facility. What, this is a question from a constituent.
Yeah.
They said, and I didn't know how to answer it. I mean, what's done in the end-of-line facility? Is it offices? Is it maintenance? What is it?
It's offices. Some of it's essentially for their communication, for making sure the trains are running and on the right tracks and everything's operating correctly. They have an access point to do maintenance from that section, but it's kind of it's within that boundary for that facility, so they can go from there up on their own elevator and stairway to get up to access the trains. And there's some maintenance they do at night that they would likely go to that facility, and they come up to go check on the trains to make sure that they're good for the next day.
Okay, all right, thank you. And Deputy Mayor Honda.
Thank you. Is it possible that the station will be finished before the rail is finished, before we get actual trains here?
Yes, that's the plan. that
How
the
long
station
will it be
done.
done before trains get here?
That's a good question. I know their schedule is looking like, it's about a 6-month time for their commissioning process from when everything should be finished to where they'll actually have revenue service, so anywhere from 6 months to a little bit longer, potentially.
And has Sound Transit talked with the city anymore about their surplus property and their plans for that?
Not, yes, but they haven't gone much further than they've started the process of, they've got a couple consultants looking at the potential for those properties, but they haven't given us more than kind of their initial grasp on what they think is similar to the TC3 properties, essentially, is what they're thinking, but they're still doing that study, so.
Sound Transit's doing this study.
Correct.
And when, with the surplus property, when they figured it will be all of their stuff they have there now, when will it be gone and cleaned up and surplused?
The plan right now is that they'll start some of the permitting and planning process before the station opens, but they won't start any of the groundwork until they've basically started revenue service. So once the facility is basically up and running, then they'll start construction.
Okay.
Is the hope, but it could take longer depending on the permit, when they start the permitting process and when they get permits for approval for building.
Okay.
Does that come to the council at all for a discussion?
On what they put down in those properties? No, I don't think so. If it's within their permitted uses, then they wouldn't necessarily need to.
And there's going to be 3 or 4 surplus lots?
Yeah, you can see them in this picture. Essentially, it's those 4 that are gray surrounding the new street network.
Thank you.
All right. Any further questions? All right. Thank you, Kent. We appreciate
thanks.
it. And that takes us to item J, progress update on the joint operations and maintenance facility. Ms. Desiree Winkler.
Right. Good evening, committee members, Deputy Mayor Honda, Council President Kochmar, Councilmember McDaniel. I am excited to be able to give you an update of the development of our new joint operation and maintenance facility. So a little background information so we can ramp everybody in to where we're at today. This project was, well need identified before 2016. Spent the next couple of years after being authorized to do some planning to determine what the current needs and the future needs were for the facility, number of staff, the amount of equipment, the functions, current and future that we'd like to see at this facility. So that all came down to needing about 10 to 12 acres. We were authorized to go seek and try to find property. Ultimately, we settled on Site 1, which is expanding the existing facility, which is located on 28th Avenue South, just north of 312th. The existing facility expands to the north all the way up to 308th Lane. At that point in time, we were authorized both in budget as well as by ordinance to move ahead and pursue purchasing those properties and moving ahead with design. So where we're at today in schedule is we are in the process of schematic design as well as the beginning of the property acquisition. We need to get the design completed, the permitting completed, and as well as the properties acquired and people relocated so that we can get out to add, shooting for May, June of 2024 with construction starting in the summer of 2024. And construction is anticipated to continue to at least December 2025, probably a little bit beyond that. So we've been working with Helix Design Group, which is our architect on the project. They've been with us since the programming phase and planning phase of the project as well, and site selection. This is a plan of the proposed site layout. So for orientation purposes, the top of the page is pointing up to the north. Down in the bottom left corner, it's South 312. That yellow shape is the existing operations building, AKA the old South King Fire District building. The new operations building is the green building, that's B1, would be located a little north of there, with the staff parking to the east, which is P2. Going further north, the middle of the site, those blue buildings consist of the fleet maintenance facility as well as all of the shop buildings for parks and public works. And then basically along the outsides of the properties, both on the west side and the north side, is where all of the storage facilities are, covered in enclosed storage, the salt bins, and to the east is where all the equipment parking and fleet parking would be. So that's in general how the site is laying out, with looking at having everything kind of flow and be able to circulate well also around the facility. What we're looking at with those storage facilities along the west and north sides is utilizing the walls of those facilities and possibly continuing the wall to provide much better security. We had a lot of break-ins, as we've told you about. We've had one as recently as 10 days ago where they cut the fence, came in, cut into one of our trailers, and took some more of our equipment. So definitely something we're looking forward to not having to deal with anymore. But we're taking very seriously on how we make sure we secure this facility. This is an outline of the operations building. So the operations building primarily serves as the offices where everybody starts, ends their day, comes for lunch. It's a pretty open concept with the two wings, left and right. The left wing right now is a Public Works wing, which has offices, and then open area in the middle for the morning huddle and meetings, and same on the other side for the Parks Department. The middle area primarily serving as the locker rooms, showers, restroom facilities. And then the north end, which is actually would be not the public-facing side, the back of the building, that's where the lunchroom is, and a crew multi-purpose room that we actually could reconfigure. We plan on having flexible furniture as well as movable walls so that we can have all hands on deck meeting between both parks and public works. And then again, it also serves most of the time as their lunchroom. This is an overview of the operation and maintenance shops as well as fleet maintenance. The larger to the right is the future fleet maintenance facility. There being a wash bay there to the far right. Right of here is actually where fueling station would be. It's not shown on the page. But the smaller structures are all the enclosed shop areas and storage as well. And again, it's designed and it looks like this for future expansion as we grow and as our operation maintenance program grows. On the property acquisition side, we've been making some really good progress. There are a total of 12 parcels. We hired an acquisition consultant, Tierra Right-of-Way Services. They are very good and familiar with the process of acquiring properties and going through the relocation process and helping the people that live here to find safe and equitable accommodations elsewhere if they choose to. So right now, our property acquisition agent and relocation specialists have met with every property owner and tenant. The appraisals and the review appraisals have been completed, and the offer packages are being prepared and should be able to be ready to start making offers in the next couple of weeks. So next steps is we'll continue with the design, including permitting. Again, the offer packages will be presented to the property owners. And we will be back shortly in the next month or so for budget authorization in order to purchase the properties, which most likely would look like an interfund loan, which in the future would be converted to the bonds that will ultimately be wrapped up to do the construction as well. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, Deputy Mayor Honda.
Thank you. Thanks for presenting this information to us. So the interfund loan, if necessary, where would we draw that money from? Do you know, or is that a question for Steve Groom?
That would be a question for Steve Groom, but it would be generally coming from funds that are typically as reserves right now. And he'll have to go over with you more on what that would look like.
Do you know how much we were talking about, or a roundabout number?
The, after the review appraisals and the relocation plans and the estimates have all come together, we are in the ballpark of somewhere between $7 to $8 million.
What about for the whole project? What, do you have a estimated cost for the entire project?
The current total project budget, and I might have to get back to you as well, is currently, it's somewhere between 42 and 45 million. And that included adding in the requested fleet maintenance and fueling station.
So then my last question is on the current location and security. I thought last time we spoke about the security issues there, we talked about the fencing and doing something stronger with the fence. Did that happen? Did you make the fencing better so that they can't break in?
We improved portions of it, and we invested in a digital security system, so it's AI through the camera system that detects people, and the system worked. Our response time was very delayed because our police department was busy with another incident, so they were able to get away. We did look at that. The previous direction was, when we looked at the costs for the fence, basically get this project built as soon as possible. That way we're not ripping out fence to put this in. Don't duplicate spending efforts, because that was, if I remember correctly, to re-fence that property was $300,000 to $500,000. It was not a cheap proposition, and we would be ripping the majority of it out. So we were told not to pursue that.
So have the break-ins decreased?
They have. This is the first, unless Desiree can think of another one, this is the first major one that we've had of recent. We did have, I think, 3 others since we've implemented the security system, 2 of which they got nothing, 1 of which they halfway got a catalytic converter, cut it out. But it has been very effective, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Good job.
And Councilmember McDaniel.
On the earlier picture of the map, you had a bunch of red lines. Were those red lines representing anything, or just it made the picture hard to understand?
Ah, sorry. Those are the red lines.
Or the elevation? Or?
Yeah, they're elevation lines.
That looks a pretty
topographic.
steep piece of property then.
It gradually steepens. I didn't include it, but we've already looked at how we're going to regrade the site. And toward the west, we're probably going to drop it down at least 3 to 5 feet, and that will help level the site out. The reason being is that a majority of the top 2 to 3 feet is organic material anyways that we'd have to just haul out and we can't use for under buildings. There will be the need on the east side of the facility to do some structural fill, specifically under the parking area in order to level that out. But that's a lot cheaper than building retaining walls. We initially thought, looking at this site, that we would be having to invest in quite a bit of retaining walls, whether we tiered the site or built one big wall along the east side to help level the area out. It looks like that it would be more cost effective for us just to bring in some fill and level it out, so.
So there's potential still doing, so backfill or retaining walls with the game plans for that backside, depending what you guys determine later on?
Yes.
Okay. The other one's about the acquisitions. Have you had anybody with pushback? And if you do have people who have pushback, who don't like the price, what is the city's, what is the options at this point for the city then?
We don't know if we have pushback yet because we haven't made any formal offers.
Okay. Is there anybody who's not been very happy with the situation?
You know, there's been people that are sad and disappointed, but so far from what we've heard, and again, we don't, as staff, personally do those interactions. We hired a right-of-way agent or property acquisition agent to do that. But feedback from our agents is that everybody so far has been cooperative. They've been disappointed, but they understand. And they've been really responsive in helping really hold their hands, you know, through this process. We'll know more in a few weeks when the offers start being made. And if we need to come back in order to look at alternative options to acquiring the property, we'll be back.
Do you know what those options might be?
The option would be condemnation.
Okay. That's it for
Yeah,
now.
it seems like that some of them may be secretly relieved that they won't living someplace with the light rail going through their backyard. But Council President Gochmar.
So how many properties are we acquiring again?
12 separate parcels. 2 of them are vacant land, but 10 of them are occupied.
Do we give them any relocation assistance?
Yes, there is, if they choose to be relocated, there is a significant amount of relocation assistance that is offered to them.
Thank you. My last question is, with the trucks that will be parked there, are they going to be parked inside the garages at night?
The majority of them will not be. They'll be parked on the outside, but there will be space, especially for our Vector truck, which is probably our singular most expensive piece of equipment that also has a lot of, of functions on there that are going to fare much better being inside as permanently stored inside. We won't have to winterize it every time we use it, basically, and de-winterize it every time we have to use it when it's during the inclement weather. But there will be space to drive some equipment and vehicles inside, but again, the majority of it will be outside.
When will this be completed?
The earliest that we're seeing would be late 2025, but more realistic, probably early 2026.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you, Desiree. Thank you very much. And I believe that is everything. Any comments from anybody on the dais? Nope. With that being said, our next meeting will be October 2nd at 5 p.m. right here, and we are adjourned.